This presentation of the Law of Success in 16 Lessons by Napoleon Hill is brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2011, all rights reserved. The Law of Success, Lesson 5, Initiative and Leadership. You can do it if you believe you can. Before you proceed to the mastery of this lesson, your attention is directed to the fact that there is perfect coordination of thought running throughout this course. You will observe that the entire 16 lessons harmonize and blend with each other so that they constitute a perfect chain that has been built, link by link, out of the factors that enter into the development of power through organized effort. You will observe also that the same fundamental principles of applied psychology form the foundation of each of these 16 lessons, although different application is made of these principles in each of the lessons. This lesson on initiative and leadership follows the lesson on self-confidence for the reason that no one could become an efficient leader or take the initiative in any great undertaking without belief in himself. Initiative and leadership are associated terms in this lesson for the reason that leadership is essential for the attainment of success, and initiative is the very foundation upon which this necessary quality of leadership is built. Initiative is as essential to success as a hub is essential to a wagon wheel. And what is initiative? It is that exceedingly rare quality that prompts, nay, impels a person to do that which ought to be done without being told to do it. Albert Hubbard expressed himself on the subject of initiative in the words, "The world bestows its big prizes, both in money and honors, for one thing, and that is initiative." What is initiative? I'll tell you. It is doing the right thing without being told. But next to doing the right thing without being told is to do it when you are told once. That is to say, carry the message to Garcia. Those who can carry a message get high honors, but their pay is not always in proportion. Next, there are those who do the right thing when necessity kicks them from behind, and these get indifference instead of honors and pittance for pay. This kind spend most of the time polishing a bench with a hard luck story. Then, still lower down in the scale than this, we have the fellow who will not do the right thing, even when someone goes along to show him how and stays to see that he does it. He is always out of a job, and receives the contempt he deserves unless he has a rich pa, in which case destiny patiently waits around the corner with a stuffed club. To which class do you belong? Inasmuch as you will be expected to take inventory of yourself and determine which of the 15 factors of this course you need most after you have completed the 16th lesson, it may be well if you begin to get ready for this analysis by answering the question that Albert Hubbard has asked. To which class do you belong? One of the peculiarities of leadership is the fact that it is never found in those who have not acquired the habit of taking the initiative. Leadership is something that you must invite yourself into. It will never thrust itself upon you. If you will carefully analyze all leaders whom you know, you will see that not only exercise initiative, but they went about their work with a definite purpose in mind. You will also see that they possessed that quality described in the 3rd lesson of this course, self-confidence. These facts are mentioned in this lesson for the reason that it will profit you to observe that successful people make use of all the factors covered by the 16 lessons of the course, and for the more important reason that it will profit you to understand thoroughly the principle of organized effort which this reading course is intended to establish in your mind. This seems an appropriate place to state that this course is not intended as a shortcut to success, nor is it intended as a mechanical formula that you may use in noteworthy achievement without effort on your part. The real value of the course lies in the use that you will make of it, and not in the course itself. The chief purpose of the course is to help you develop in yourself the 15 qualities covered by the 16 lessons of the course, and one of the most important of these qualities is initiative, the subject of this lesson. We will now proceed to apply the principle upon which this lesson is founded by describing in detail just how it served successfully to complete a business transaction which most people would call difficult. In 1916, I needed $25,000 with which to create an educational institution, but I had neither this sum nor sufficient collateral with which to borrow it through the usual banking sources. Did I bemoan my fate or think of what I might accomplish if some rich relative or good Samaritan would come to my rescue by loaning me the necessary capital? I did nothing of the sort. I did just what you will be advised throughout this course to do. First of all, I made the securing of this capital my definite chief aim. Second, I laid out a complete plan through which to transform this aim into reality. Backed by sufficient self-confidence and spurred on by initiative, I proceeded to put my plan into action. But before the action stage of the plan had been reached, more than 6 weeks of constant, persistent study and effort and thought were embodied in it. If a plan is to be sound, it must be built of carefully chosen material. You will here observe the application of the principle of organized effort, through the operation of which it is possible for one to ally or associate several interests in such a way that each of these interests is greatly strengthened and each supports all the others, just as one link in a chain supports all the other links. I wanted this $25,000 in capital for the purpose of creating a school of advertising and salesmanship. 2 things were necessary for the organization of such a school. One was the $25,000 capital, which I did not have, and the other was my proper course of instruction, which I did have. My problem was to ally myself with some group of men who needed that which I had, and who would supply me the $25,000. This alliance had to be made through a plan that would benefit all concerned. After my plan had been completed, and I was satisfied that it was equitable and sound, I laid it before the owner of a well-known and reputable business college, which just then was finding competition quite keen and was badly in need of a plan for meeting this competition. My plan was presented in about these words. Whereas you have one of the most reputable business colleges in the city, and whereas you need some plan with which to meet the stiff competition in your field, and whereas your good reputation has provided you with all the credit you need, and whereas I have a plan that will help you meet this competition successfully, be it resolved that we ally ourselves through a plan that will give you that which you need and at the same time supply me with something which I need. Then I proceeded to unfold my plan further in these words. I have written a very practical course on advertising and salesmanship. Having built this course out of my actual experience in training and directing salesmen, and my experience in planning and directing many successful advertising campaigns, I have back of it plenty of evidence of its soundness. If you will use your credit in helping market this course, I will place it in your business college as one of the regular departments of your curriculum and take entire charge of this newly created department. No other business college in the city will be able to meet your competition for the reason that no other college has such a course as this. The advertising that you do in marketing this course will serve also to stimulate the demand for your regular business course. You may charge the entire amount that you spend for this advertising to my department, and the advertising bill will be paid out of that department, leaving you the accumulative advantage that will accrue to you and your other departments without cost to you. Now I suppose you will want to know where I profit by this transaction, and I will tell you. I want you to enter into a contract with me in which it will be agreed that when the cash receipts from my department equal the amount that you have paid out of the contracted to pay out the advertising, my department and my course in advertising and salesmanship become my own, and I may have the privilege of separating this department from your school and running it under my own name. The plan was agreeable, and the contract was closed. Please keep in mind that my definite purpose was to secure the use of $25,000 for which I had no security to offer. In a little less than a year, the business college had paid out slightly more than $25,000 for advertising and marketing my course and the other expenses incidental to the operation of this newly organized department. While the department had collected and turned back to the college in tuition fees a sum equaling the amount the college had spent, and I took the department over as a going and self-sustaining business according to the terms of my contract. As a matter of fact, this newly created department not only served to attract students for the other departments of the college, but at the same time the tuition fees collected through this new department were sufficient to place it on self-sustaining basis before the end of the first year. Now you can see that while the college did not loan me 1 penny of actual capital, it nevertheless supplied me with credit which served exactly the same purpose. I said that my plan was founded upon equity, that it contemplated a benefit to all parties concerned. The benefit accruing to me was the use of the $25,000, which resulted in an establishment and self-sustaining business by the end of the first year. The benefit accruing to the college was that the students secured for its regular commercial and business course as a result of the money spent in advertising my department, and all advertising having been done under the name of the college. Today that business college is one of the most successful schools of its kind, and it stands as a monument of sound evidence with which to demonstrate the value of allied effort. This incident has been related not alone because it shows the value of initiative and leadership, but for the reason that it leads up to the subject covered by the next lesson of this reading course on the law of success, which is imagination. There are generally many plans through the operation of which a desired object may be achieved, and it often happens to be true that the obvious and usual methods employed are not the best. The usual method of procedure in the case related would have been that of borrowing from a bank. You can see that this method was impractical in this case for the reason that no collateral was available. A great philosopher once said, "Initiative is the passkey that opens the door to opportunity." I do not recall who this philosopher was, but I know that he was great because of the soundness of his statement. We will now proceed to outline the exact procedure that you must follow if you are to become a person of initiative and leadership. First, you must master the habit of procrastination and eliminate it from your makeup. This habit of putting off until tomorrow that which you should have done last week or last year or a score of years ago is gnawing at the very vitals of your being, and you can accomplish nothing until you throw it off. The method through which you eliminate procrastination is based upon a well-known and scientifically tested principle of psychology, which has been referred to in the 2 preceding lessons of this course as autosuggestion. Copy the following formula and place it conspicuously in your room where you will see it as you retire at night and as you arise in the morning. Initiative and leadership. Having chosen a definite chief aim as my life work, I now understand it to be my duty to transform this purpose into reality. Therefore, I will form the habit of taking some definite action each day that will carry me one step nearer the attainment of my definite chief aim. I know that procrastination is a deadly enemy of all who would become leaders in any undertaking, and I will eliminate this habit from my makeup by A. Doing some one definite thing each day that ought to be done without anyone telling me to do it. B. Looking around until I find at least one thing that I can do each day that I've not been in the habit of doing, and that will be of value to others without exception of pay. C. Telling at least one other person each day of the value of practicing this habit of doing something that ought to be done without being told to do it. I can see that the muscles of the body become strong in proportion to the extent to which they are used. Therefore, I understand that the habit of initiative also becomes fixed in proportion to the extent that it is practiced. I realize that the place to begin developing the habit of initiative is in the small, commonplace things connected with my daily work. Therefore I will go at my work each day as I were doing it solely for the purpose of developing this necessary habit of initiative. I understand that by practicing this habit of taking the initiative in connection with my daily work, I will not only develop habit, but I will also be attracting the attention of those who will place greater value on my services as a result of this practice. Sign the document. Regardless of what you are doing now, every day brings you face to face with a chance to render some service outside of the course of your regular duties that will be of value to others. In rendering this additional service of your own accord, you of course understand that you are not doing so with the object of receiving monetary pay. You are rendering this service because it provides you with ways and means of exercising, developing, and making stronger the aggressive spirit of initiative, which you must possess before you can ever become an outstanding figure in the affairs of your chosen field of life work. Those who work for money alone, and who receive for their pay nothing but money, are always underpaid, no matter how much they receive. Money is necessary, but the big prizes of life cannot be measured in dollars and cents. No amount of money could possibly be made to take the place of the happiness and joy and pride that belong to the person who digs a better ditch, or builds a better chicken coop, or sweeps a cleaner floor, or cooks a better meal. Every normal person loves to create something that is better than the average. The joy of creating a work of art is a joy that cannot be replaced by money or any other form of material possession. I have in my employ a young lady who opens, assorts, and answers much of my personal mail. She began in my employ more than 3 years ago. Then her duties were to take dictation when she was asked to do so. Her salary was about the same as that which others received for similar service. One day I dictated the following motto, which I asked her to typewrite for me. Remember that your only limitation is the one that you set up in your own mind. As she handed the typewritten page back to me, she said, "Your motto has given me an idea that is going to be of value to both you and me." I told her I was glad to have been of service to her. The incident made no particular impression on my mind, but from that day on I could see that it had made a tremendous impression on her mind. She began to come back to the office after supper and perform service that she was neither paid for nor expected to perform. Without anyone telling her to do it, she began to bring to my desk letters that she had answered for me. She had studied my style, and these letters were attended to as well as I could have done it, in some instances much better. She kept up this habit until my personal secretary resigned. When I began to look for someone to take his place, what was more natural than to turn to this young woman to fill the place? Before I had time to give her the position, she took it on her initiative. My personal mail began to come to my desk with a new secretary name attached, and she was that secretary. On her own time, after hours, without additional pay, she had prepared herself for the best position on my staff. But that is not all. This young lady became so noticeably efficient that she began to attract the attention of others who offered her attractive positions. I have increased her salary many times, and she now receives a salary more than 4 times as large as the amount she received when she first went to work for me as an ordinary stenographer. And to tell you the truth, I am helpless in the matter, because she has made herself so valuable to me that I cannot get along without her. That is initiative transformed into practical, understandable terms. I would be remiss in my duties if I failed to direct your attention to an advantage other than a greatly increased salary that this young lady's initiative has brought her. It has developed in her a spirit of cheerfulness that brings her happiness, which most stenographers never know. Her work is not work it is a great interesting game at which she is playing. Even though she arrives at the office ahead of the regular stenographers and remains there long after they have watched the clock tick off 5 o'clock in quitting time, her hours are shorter by far than are those of the other workers. Hours of labor do not drag on the hands of those who are happy at their work. This brings us to the next step in our description of the exact procedure that you must follow in developing initiative and leadership. Second, you of course understand that the only way to get happiness is by giving it away to others. The same applies to the development of initiative. You can best develop this essential quality in yourself by making it your business to interest those around you in doing the same thing. It is a well-known fact that a man learns best that which he endeavors to teach others. If a man embraces a certain creed or religious faith, the first thing he does is to go out and try and sell it to others. And in exact proportion to the extent to which he impresses others, does he impress himself. In the field of salesmanship, it is a well-known fact that no salesman is successful in selling others until he has first made a good job of selling himself. Stated conversely, no salesman can do his best to sell others without sooner or later selling himself that which he's trying to sell to others. Any statement that a person repeats over and over again for the purpose of inducing others to believe it, he also will come to believe. And this holds good whether the statement is false or true. You can now see the advantage of making it your business to talk initiative, think initiative, eat initiative, sleep initiative, and practice initiative. By so doing, you are becoming a person of initiative and leadership. For it is a well-known fact that people will readily, willingly, and voluntarily follow the person who shows by his action that he is a person of initiative. In the place where you work or the community in which you live, you come in contact with other people. Make it your business to interest every one of them who will listen to you in the development of initiative. It will not be necessary for you to give your reasons for doing this, nor will it be necessary for you to announce the fact that you are doing it. Just go ahead and do it. In your mind, you will understand, of course, that you are doing it because this practice will help you and will at least do those whom you influence in the same practice no harm. If you wish to try an experiment that will prove both interesting and profitable to you, pick out some person of your acquaintance whom you know to be a person who never does anything that he is not expected to do, and begin selling him your idea of initiative. Do not stop by merely discussing the subject once. Keep it up every time you have a convenient opportunity. Approach the subject from a different angle each time. If you go at this experiment in a tactful and forceful manner, you will soon observe a change in the person on whom you are trying to experiment. And you will observe something else of a more important still. You will observe a change in yourself. Do not fail to try this experiment. You cannot talk initiative to others without developing a desire to practice it yourself. Through the operation of the principle of autosuggestion, every statement that you make to others leaves its imprint on your own subconscious mind, and this holds good whether your statements are false or true. You have often heard the saying, "He who lives by the sword will die by the sword." Properly interpreted, this simply means that we are constantly attracting to ourselves and weaving into our own characters and personalities those qualities which our influence is helping to create in others. If we help others develop the habit of initiative, we in turn develop the same habit. If we sow the seeds of hatred and envy and discouragement in others, we in turn develop those qualities in ourselves. This principle, through which a man comes to resemble in his own nature those whom he most admires, is fully brought out in Hawthorne's story, The Great Stone Face, a story that every parent should have his offspring read. We come now to the next step in our description of the exact procedure that you must follow in developing initiative and leadership. Third, before we go further, let it be understood what is meant by the term leadership, as it is used in connection with this reading course on the law of success. There are two brands of leadership, and one of them is as deadly and destructive as the other is helpful and constructive. The deadly brand, which leads not to success, but to absolute failure, is the brand adopted by pseudo-leaders who force their leadership on unwilling followers. It will not be necessary here to describe this brand or to point out the fields of endeavor in which it is practiced, with the exception of the field of war. And in this field we will mention but one notable exception, that of Napoleon. Napoleon was a leader, there can be no doubt about this, but he led his followers and himself to destruction. The details are recorded in the history of France and the French people, where you may study them if you choose. It is not Napoleon's brand of leadership that is recommended in this course, although I will admit that Napoleon possessed all the necessary fundamentals for great leadership, excepting one he lacked, the spirit of helpfulness to others as an objective. His desire for the power that comes through leadership was based solely on self-aggrandizement. His desire for leadership was built upon personal ambition and not upon the desire to lift the French people to a higher and nobler station in the affairs of nations. The brand of leadership that is recommended through this course of instruction is the brand which leads to self-determination and freedom, and self-development and enlightenment and justice. This is the brand that endures. For example, and as a contrast with the brand of leadership through which Napoleon raised himself into prominence, consider our own American commoner Lincoln. The object of his leadership was to bring truth and justice and understanding to the people of the United States. Even though he died a martyr to his belief in this brand of leadership, his name has been engraved upon the heart of the world in terms of loving kindliness that will never bring aught but good to the world. Both Lincoln and Napoleon led armies in warfare, but the objects of their leadership were as different as night is different from day. If it would give you a better understanding of the principles upon which this reading course is based, you could easily be cited to leadership of today which resembles both the brand that Napoleon employed and that which Lincoln made the foundation of his life work. But this is not essential. Your own ability to look around and analyze men who take the leading parts in all lines of endeavor is sufficient to enable you to pick out the Lincoln as well as the Napoleon types. Your own judgment will help you decide which type you prefer to emulate. There can be no doubt in your mind as to the brand of leadership that is recommended in this reading course, and there should be no question in your mind as to which of the two brands described you will adopt as your brand. We make no recommendation on this subject, however, for the reason that this reading course has been prepared as a means of laying before its students the fundamental principles upon which power is developed, and not as a preachment on ethical conduct. We present both the constructive and the destructive possibilities of the principles outlined in this course, that you may become familiar with both, but we leave entirely to your own discretion the choice and application of these principles, believing that your own intelligence will guide you to make a wise selection. The penalty of leadership. In every field of human endeavor, he that is first must perpetually live in the white light of publicity. Whether the leadership be vested in a man or in a manufactured product, emulation and envy are ever at work. In art, in literature, in music, in industry, the reward and the punishment are always the same. The reward is widespread recognition, the punishments fierce denial and detractions. When a man's work becomes a standard for the whole world, it also becomes a target for the shafts of the envious few. If his work be merely mediocre, he will be left severely alone. If he achieve a masterpiece, it will set a million tongues a-wagging. Jealousy does not protrude its forked tongue at the artist who produces a commonplace painting. Whatsoever you write or paint or play or sing or build, no one will strive to surpass or slander you, unless your work be stamped with the seal of genius. Long, long after a great work or a good work has been done, those who are disappointed or envious continue to cry out that it cannot be done. Mean voices were raised against the author of the Law of Success before the ink was dry on the first textbook. Poisoned pens were released again against the author and the philosophy the moment the first edition of the course was printed. Spiteful little voices in the domain of art were raised against our own Whistler as a Mont Blanc, long after the world acclaimed him its greatest artistic genius. Multitudes flocked to Bayreuth to worship at the musical shrine of Wagner, while the little group of those whom he had dethroned and displaced argued angrily that he was no musician at all. The little world continued to protest that Fulton could never build a steamboat, while the big world flocked to the riverbanks to see his boat steam by. Small, narrow voices cried out that Henry Ford would not last another year. But above and beyond the din of their childish prattle, Ford went silently about his business and made himself the richest and most successful man on earth. The leader is assailed because he is a leader, and the effort to equal him is merely added proof of his leadership. Failing to equal or to excel, the follower seeks to deprecate and to destroy, but only confirms the superiority of that which he strives to supplant. There is nothing new in this. It is as old as the world and as old as the human passions, envy, fear, greed, ambition, and a desire to surpass, and it all avails to nothing. If the leader truly leads, he remains the leader. Master poet, master painter, master workman, each in his turn is assailed, and each holds his laurels through the ages. That which is good or great makes itself known, no matter how loud the clamor of denial. A real leader cannot be slandered or damaged by lies of the envious, because all such attempts serve only to turn the spotlight on his ability, and the real ability always finds a generous following. Attempts to destroy real leadership is love's labor lost, because that which deserves to live, lives. We come back now to the discussion of the third step of the procedure that you must follow in developing initiative and leadership. This third step takes us back for a review of the principle of organized effort as described in the preceding lessons of this course. You have already learned that no man can accomplish enduring results of a far-reaching nature without the aid and cooperation of others. You have already learned that when two or more persons ally themselves in any undertaking, in the spirit of harmony and understanding, each person in the alliance thereby multiplies his own power of achievement. Nowhere is this principle more evidenced than it is in an industry of business in which there is perfect teamwork between the employer and the employees. Wherever you find this teamwork, you find prosperity and goodwill on both sides. Cooperation is said to be the most important word in the English language. It plays an important part in the affairs of the home, in the relationship of man and wife, parents and children. It plays an important part in the affairs of state. So important is this principle of cooperation that no leader can become powerful or last long who does not understand and apply it in his leadership. Lack of cooperation has destroyed more business enterprises than have all other causes combined. In my 25 years of active business experience and observation, I have witnessed the destruction of all manner of business enterprises because of dissension and lack of application of this principle of cooperation. In the practice of law, I have observed the destruction of homes and divorce cases without end as a result of the lack of cooperation between man and wife. In a study of the histories of nations, it becomes alarmingly obvious that lack of cooperative effort has been a curse to the human race all back down the ages. Turn back the pages of these histories and study them, and you will learn a lesson in cooperation that will impress itself indelibly upon your mind. You are paying, and your children and your children's children will continue to pay for the cost of the most expensive and destructive war the world has ever known. Because nations have not yet learned that a part of the world cannot suffer without damage and suffering to the whole world. This same rule applies with telling effect in the conduct of modern business and industry. When an industry becomes disorganized and torn asunder by strikes and other forms of disagreement, both the employers and employees suffer irreparable loss. But the damage does not stop there. This loss becomes a burden to the public and takes on the form of higher prices and scarcity of the necessities of life. The people of the United States who rent their homes are feeling the burden at this very moment of lack of cooperation between contractors and builders and the workers. So uncertain has the relationship between the contractors and their employees become that the contractors will not undertake a building without adding to the cost an arbitrary sum sufficient to protect them in the event of labor troubles. This additional cost increases rents and places unnecessary burden upon the backs of millions of people. In this instant, the lack of cooperation between a few men places heavy and almost unbearable burdens upon millions of people. The same evil exists in the operation of our railroads. Lack of harmony and cooperation between the railroad management and the workers has made it necessary for the railroads to increase their freight and passenger rates, and this in turn has increased the cost of life's necessities to almost unbearable proportions. Here again, lack of cooperation between a few leads to hardships for millions of people. These facts are cited without effort or desire to place the responsibility for this lack of cooperation, since the object of this reading course is to help its student get at facts. It may be truthfully stated that the high cost of living that everywhere manifests itself today has grown out of a lack of application of the principle of cooperative leadership. Those who wish to decry present systems of government and industrial management may do so, but in the final analysis it becomes obvious to all except those who are not seeking the truth that the evils of government and of industry have grown out of the lack of cooperation. Nor can it be truthfully said that all the evils of the world are confined to the affairs of state and industry. Take a look at the churches and you will observe the damaging effects of lack of cooperation. No particular church is cited, but analyze any church or group of churches where lack of coordination of effort prevails, and you will see evidence of disintegration that limits the service these services could render. For example, take the average town or small city where rivalry has sprung up between the churches, and notice what has happened, especially those towns in which the number of churches is far out of proportion to the population. Through harmonized effort and through cooperation, the churches of the world could wield sufficient influence to render war an impossibility. Through this same principle of cooperative effort, the churches and the leaders of business and industry could eliminate rascality and sharp practices, and all this could be brought about speedily. These possibilities are not mentioned in a spirit of criticism, but only as a means of illustrating the power of cooperation, and to emphasize my belief in the potential power of the churches of the world. So there will be no possibility of misinterpretation of my meaning in the reference that I have here made to churches. I will repeat that which I have so often said in person, namely, that had it not been for the influence of the churches, no man would be safe in walking down the street. Men would be at each other's throat like wolves, and civilizations would still be in the prehistoric age. My complaint is not against the work that the churches have done, but the work that they could have done through leadership that was based upon the principle of coordinated, cooperative effort, which would have carried civilization at least 1,000 years ahead of where it is today. It is not yet too late for such leadership. That you may more fully grasp the fundamental principle of cooperative effort, you are urged to go to the public library and read The Science of Power by Benjamin Kidd. Out of the scores of volumes by some of the soundest thinkers of the world that I've read during the past 15 years, no single volume has given me such a full understanding of the possibilities of cooperative effort as has this book. In recommending that you read this book, it is not my purpose to endorse the book in its entirety, for it offers some theories with which I am not in accord. If you read it, do so with an open mind, and take from it only that which you feel you can use to an advantage in achieving the object of your definite chief aim. The book will stimulate thought, which is the greatest service that any book can render. As a matter of fact, the chief object of this reading course on the law of success is to stimulate deliberate thought, particularly that brand of thought that is free from bias and prejudice, and is seeking truth no matter where or how or when it may be found. During the World War, I was fortunate enough to listen to great soldiers' analysis of how to be a leader. This analysis was given to the student officers of the 2nd Training Camp at Fort Sheridan by Major C.A. Bach, a quiet, unassuming Army officer acting as an instructor. I have preserved a copy of this address because I believe it to be one of the finest lessons on leadership ever recorded. The wisdom of Major Bach's address is so vital to the businessman aspiring to leadership, or to the section boss, or to the stenographer, or to the foreman of the shop, or to the president of the works, that I have preserved it as part of this reading course. It is my earnest hope that through the agency of this course, this remarkable dissertation on leadership will find its way into the hands of every employer and every worker and every ambitious person who aspires to leadership in any walk of life. The principles upon which the address is based are applicable to leadership in business and industry and finance as they are in a successful conduct of warfare. Major Bach spoke as follows. In a short time, each of you men will control the lives of a certain number of other men. You will have in your charge loyal but untrained citizens who look to you for instruction and guidance. Your word will be their law. Your most casual remark will be remembered. Your mannerisms will be aped. Your clothing, your carriage, your vocabulary, your manner of command will be imitated. When you join your organization, you will find that there are a willing body of men who ask from you nothing more than the qualities that will command their respect, their loyalty, and their obedience. They are perfectly ready and eager to follow you so long as you can convince them that you have these qualities. When the time comes that they are satisfied you do not possess them, you might as well kiss yourself goodbye. Your usefulness in that organization is at an end. How remarkably true this is of all manner of leadership. From the standpoint of society, the world may be divided into leaders and followers. The professions have their leaders. The financial world has its leaders. In all this leadership, it is difficult, if not impossible, to separate from the element of pure leadership that selfish element of personal gain or advantage to the individual, without which any leadership would lose its value. It is in military service only, where men freely sacrifice their lives for a faith, where men are willing to suffer and die for the right or the prevention of its wrong, that we can hope to realize leadership in its most exalted and disinterested sense. Therefore, when I say leadership, I mean military leadership. In a few days, the great mass of you men will receive commissions as officers. These commissions will not make you leaders. They will merely make you officers. They will place you in a position where you can become leaders if you possess the proper attributes. But you must make good, not so much with the man over you as with the man under you. Men must and will follow into battle officers who are not leaders, but the driving power behind these men is not enthusiasm but discipline. They go without doubt and trembling that prompts the unspoken question, what will he do next? Such men obey the letter of their orders, but no more. Of devotion to their commander, of exalted enthusiasm which scorns personal risk, of self-sacrifice to ensure their personal safety, they know nothing. Their legs carry them forward because their brain and their training tell them they must go. Their spirit does not go with them. Great results are not achieved by cold, passive, unresponsive soldiers. They don't go very far and they stop as soon as they can. Leadership not only demands but receives the willing, unhesitating, unfaltering obedience and loyalty of other men, and a devotion that will cause them, when the time comes, to follow their uncrowned king to hell and back again, if necessary. You will ask yourself, of just what, then, does leadership consist? What must I do to become a leader? What are the attributes of leadership, and how can I cultivate them? Leadership is a composite of a number of qualities, just as success is a composite of the 15 factors out of which this reading course was built. Among the most important, I would list self-confidence, moral ascendancy, self-sacrifice, paternalism, fairness, initiative, decision, dignity, and courage. Self-confidence results first from exact knowledge. Second, the ability to impart that knowledge. And third, the feeling of superiority over others that naturally follows. All these give the officer poise. To lead, you must know. You may bluff all your men some of the time, but you can't do it all the time. Men will not have confidence in an officer unless he knows his business, and he must know it from the ground up. The officer should know more about paperwork than his first sergeant and company clerk put together. He should know more about messing than his mess sergeant, more about diseases of the horse than his troop farrier. He should be at least as good a shot as any man in a company. If the officer does not know and demonstrates the fact that he does not know, it is entirely human for the soldier to say to himself, "To hell with him. He doesn't know as much about this as I do," and calmly disregard the instructions received. There is no substitute for accurate knowledge. Become so well informed that men will hunt you up to ask questions, and that your brother officers will say to one another, "Ask Smith, he knows." And not only should each officer know thoroughly the duties of his next grade, but he should study those of the 2 grades next above him. A twofold benefit attaches to this. He prepares himself for duties which may fall to his lot any time during battle. He further gains a broader viewpoint which enables him to appreciate the necessity for the issuance of orders and join more intelligently in their execution. Not only must the officer know, but he must be able to put what he knows into grammatical, interesting, forceful language. He must learn to stand on his feet and speak without embarrassment. I am told that in British training camps, student officers are required to deliver 10-minute talk on any subject they choose. That is an excellent practice, for to speak clearly, one must think clearly, and clear, logical thinking expresses itself in definite, positive orders. While self-confidence is the result of knowing more than your men, moral ascendancy over them is based upon your belief that you are the better man. To gain and maintain this ascendancy, you must have self-control, physical vitality and endurance and moral force. You must have yourself so well in hand that even though in battle you may be scared stiff, you will never show it. For if by so much as a hurried movement or a trembling of the hands, or a change of expression, or a hasty order hastily revoked, you indicate your mental condition, it will be reflected in your men in a far greater degree. In garrison or camp, many instances will arise to try your temper and wreck the sweetness of your disposition. If at such times you fly off the handle, you have no business to be in charge of men. For men in anger say and do things that they almost invariably regret afterwards. An officer should never apologize to his men. Also, an officer should never be guilty of an act for which his sense of justice tells him he should apologize. Another element in gaining moral ascendancy lies in the possession of enough physical vitality and endurance to withstand the hardships to which you and your men are subjected, and a dauntless spirit that enables you not only to accept them cheerfully, but to minimize their magnitude. Make light of your troubles, belittle your trials, and you will help vitality to build up within your organization, an esprit whose value in time of stress cannot be measured. Moral force is the third element in gaining moral ascendancy. To exert moral force, you must live clean. You must have sufficient brain power to see the right and the will to do right. Be an example to your men. An officer can be a power for good or a power for evil. Don't preach to them. That will be worse than useless. Live the kind of life you would have them lead. and you will be surprised to see the number that will imitate you. A loud-mouthed, profane captain who is careless of his personal appearance will have a loud-mouthed, profane, dirty company. Remember what I tell you, your company will be the reflection of yourself. If you have a rotten company, it will be because you are a rotten captain. Self-sacrifice is essential to leadership. You will give all the time. You will give of yourself physically for the longest hours. The hardest work and the greatest responsibility are the lot of the captain. He is the first man up in the morning and the last man in at night. He works while others sleep. You will give of yourself mentally, in sympathy and appreciation for the troubles of men in your charge. This one's mother has died, and that one has lost all his savings in a bank failure. They may desire help, but more than anything else, they desire sympathy. Don't make the mistake of turning such men down with a statement that you have troubles of your own. For every time you do that, you knock a stone out of the foundation of your very own house. Your men are your foundation, and your house of leadership will tumble about your ears unless it rests securely upon them. Finally, you will give of your own slender financial resources. You will frequently spend your own money to conserve the health and well-being of your men, or to assist them when in trouble. Generally, you get your money back. Very frequently, you must charge it off to profit and loss. Even so, it is worth the cost. When I say that paternalism is essential to leadership, I use the term in its better sense. I do not now refer to that form of paternalism which robs men of initiative, self-reliance, and self-respect. I refer to the paternalism that manifests itself in a watchful care for the comfort and welfare of those in your charge. Soldiers are much like children. You must see that they have shelter, food, and clothing, the best that your utmost efforts can provide. You must see that they have food to eat before you think of your own, that they have each as good a bed as can be provided before you consider where you will sleep. You must be far more solicitous of their comfort than of your own. You must look after their health. You must conserve their strength by not demanding needless exertion or useless labor. And by doing all these things, you are breathing life into what would otherwise be a mere machine. You are creating a soul in your organization that will make the mass respond to you as though it were one man, and that is esprit. And when your organization has this esprit, you will wake up some morning and discover that your tables have been turned, that instead of your constantly looking out for them, they have, without even a hint from you, taken up the task of looking out for you. You will find that a detail is always there to see that your tent, if you have one, is promptly pitched, that the most and the cleanest bedding is brought to your tent, that from some mysterious source 2 eggs have been added to your supper when no one else has any, that an extra man is helping your men give your horse a super grooming, that your wishes are anticipated, that every man is Johnny on the spot, and then you have arrived. You cannot treat all men alike. A punishment that would be dismissed by one man with a shrug of the shoulders is mental anguish for another. A company commander who, for a given offense, has a standard punishment that applies to all is either too indolent or too stupid to study the personality of his men. In his case, justice is certainly blind. Study your men as carefully as the surgeon studies a difficult case. And when you are sure of your diagnosis, apply the remedy. And remember that you apply the remedy to effect a cure, not merely to see the victim squirm. It may be necessary to cut deep, but when you are satisfied as to your diagnosis, don't be diverted from your purpose by any false sympathy for the patient. Hand in hand with fairness in awarding punishment walks fairness in giving credit. Everybody hates a human hog. When one of your men has accomplished an especially creditable piece of work, see that he gets the proper reward. Turn heaven and earth upside down to get it for him, Don't try to make it away from him and hog it for yourself. You may do this and get away with it, but you have lost the respect and loyalty of your men. Sooner or later, your brother officers will hear of it and shun you like a leper. In war, there is glory enough for all. Give the man under you his due. The man who always takes and never gives is not a leader. He is a parasite. There is another kind of fairness, that which will prevent an officer from abusing the privileges of his rank. When you expect respect from soldiers, be sure you treat them with equal respect. Build up their manhood and self-respect. Don't try and pull it down. For an officer to be overbearing and insulting in the treatment of enlisted men is the act of a coward. He ties the man to a tree with ropes of discipline and then strikes him in the face, knowing full well that the man cannot strike back. Consideration, courtesy, and respect from officers toward enlisted men are not incompatible with discipline. They are parts of our discipline. Without initiative and decision, no man can expect to lead. In maneuvers, you will frequently see, when an emergency arises, certain men calmly give instant orders which later on analysis prove to be, if not exactly the right thing, but very nearly the right thing to have done. You will see other men in emergency become badly rattled. Their brains refuse to work, or they give a hasty order, revoke it, give another, revoke that. In short, show every indication of being in a blue funk. Regarding the first man, you may say, "That man is a genius. He hasn't had time to reason this thing out. He acts intuitively." Forget it. Genius is merely the capacity for taking infinite pains. The man who is ready is the man who has prepared himself. He has studied beforehand the possible situations that might arise. He has made tentative plans covering such situations. When he is confronted by the emergency, he is ready to meet it. He must have sufficient mental alertness to appreciate the problem that confronts him and the power of quick reasoning to determine what changes are necessary in his already formulated plan. He must also have the decision to order the execution and stick to his orders. Any reasonable order in an emergency is better than no order. The situation is there, meet it. It is better to do something and do the wrong thing than to hesitate, hunt around for the right thing to do, and wind up by doing nothing at all. And having decided on a line of action, stick to it. Don't vacillate. Men have no confidence in an officer who doesn't know his own mind. Occasionally you will be called upon to meet a situation which no reasonable human being could anticipate. If you have prepared yourself to meet other emergencies which you could anticipate, the mental training you have thereby gained will enable you to act promptly and with calmness. You must frequently act without orders from higher authority. Time will not permit you to wait for them. Here again enters the importance of studying the work of officers above you. If you have a comprehensive grasp of the entire situation and can form an idea of the general plan of your superiors, that and your previous emergency training will enable you to determine that the responsibility is yours and to issue the necessary orders without a delay. The element of personal dignity is important in military leadership. Be the friend of your men, but do not become their intimate. Your men should stand in awe of you, not fear. If your men presume to become familiar, it is your fault and not theirs. Your actions have encouraged them to do so. And above all things, don't cheapen yourself by courting their friendship or currying their favor. They will despise you for it. If you are worthy of their loyalty and respect and devotion, they will surely give all things without asking. If you are not, nothing that you can do will win them. It is exceedingly difficult for an officer to be dignified while wearing a dirty, spotted uniform and a 3-day stubble of whiskers on his face. Such a man lacks self-respect, and self-respect is an essential of dignity. There may be occasions when your work entails dirty clothes and an unshaved face. Your men all look that way. At such times there is ample reason for your appearance. In fact, it would be a mistake to look too clean. They would think that you were not doing your share. But as soon as this unusual occasion has passed, set an example for personal neatness. And then I would mention courage. Moral courage you need as well as mental courage. That kind of moral courage which enables you to adhere without faltering to a determined course of action, which your judgment has indicated is one of the best suited to secure the desired result. You will find many times, especially in action, that after having issued your orders to do a certain thing, you will be beset by misgivings and doubt. You will see, or think you see, other and better means for accomplishing the object sought. You will be strongly tempted to change your orders. Don't do it until it is clearly manifested that your first orders were radically wrong. For if you do, you will be again worried by doubts as to the efficiency of your second orders. Every time you change your orders without obvious reason, you weaken your authority and impair the confidence of your men. Have the moral courage to stand by your order and see it through. Moral courage further demands that you assume the responsibility for your own acts. If your subordinates have loyally carried out your orders and the movement you directed is a failure, the failure is yours, not theirs. Yours would have been the honor had it been successful. Take the blame if the result is disaster. Don't try to shift it to a subordinate and make them the goat. That is a cowardly act. Furthermore, you will need moral courage to determine the fate of those under you. You will frequently be called upon for recommendation for promotion or demotion of officers and non-commissioned officers in your immediate command. Keep clearly in mind your personal integrity and the duty you owe your country. Do not let yourself be deflected from a strict sense of justice by feelings of personal friendship. If your own brother is your second lieutenant and you find him unfit to hold his commission, eliminate him. If you don't, your lack of moral courage may result in the loss of valuable lives. If, on the other hand, you are called upon for a recommendation concerning a man whom for personal reasons you thoroughly dislike, do not fail to do him full justice. Remember that your aim is the general good, not the satisfaction of an individual grudge. I am taking it for granted that you have physical courage. I need not tell you how necessary that is. Courage is more than bravery. Bravery is fearlessness, the absence of fear. The merest dolt may be brave because he lacks the mentality to appreciate his danger. He doesn't know enough to be afraid. Courage, however, is that firmness of spirit, that moral backbone which, while fully appreciating the danger involved, nevertheless goes on with the undertaking. Bravery is physical, courage is mental and moral. You may be cold all over, your hands may tremble, your legs may quake, your knees be ready to give way. That is fear. If, nevertheless, you go forward, if, in spite of this physical defection, you continue to lead your men against the enemy, you have courage. The physical manifestations of fear will pass away. You may never experience them but once. They are the buck fever of the hunter who tries to shoot his first deer. You must not give way to them. A number of years ago, while taking a course in demolitions, the class of which I was a member was handling dynamite. The instructor said regarding to its manipulation, "I must caution you gentlemen to be careful in the use of these explosives. One man has but one accident, and so I would caution you. If you give way to fear, that will doubtless beset you in your first action. If you show the white feather, if you let your men go forward while you hunt a shell crater, you will never again have the opportunity of leading these men. Use judgment in calling on your men for displays of physical courage or bravery. Don't ask any man to go where you would not go yourself. If your common sense tells you that the place is too dangerous for you to venture into, then it is too dangerous for him. You know his life is as valuable to him as yours is to you. Occasionally, some of your men must be exposed to danger which you cannot share. A message must be taken across a fire-swept zone. You call for volunteers. If your men know you and know that you are right, you will never lack volunteers. For they will know your heart is your work, that you are giving your country the best you have, that you would willingly carry the message yourself if you could. Your example and enthusiasm will have inspired them. And lastly, if you aspire to leadership, I would urge you to study men. Get under their skins and find out what is inside. Some men are quite different from what they appear to be on the surface. Determine the working of their mind. Much of General Robert E. Lee's success as a leader may be ascribed to his ability as a psychologist. He knew most of his opponents from West Point days, knew the workings of their minds, and he believed that they would do certain things under certain circumstances, and in nearly every case he was able to anticipate their movement and block the execution. You cannot know your opponent in this war in the same way, but you can know your own men. You can study each to determine wherein lies his strength and his weakness, which man can be relied upon to the last gasp and which cannot. Know your men, know your business, know yourself. In all literature, you will not find a better description of leadership than this. Apply it to yourself or to your business or to your profession or to the place where you are employed, and you will observe how well it serves you as your guide. Major Bach's address is one that might well be delivered to every boy and girl who graduates in high school. It might well be delivered to every college graduate. It might well become the book of rules for every man who is placed in a position of leadership over other men, no matter in what calling, business, or profession. In Lesson 2, you learned the value of a definite chief aim. Let it be here emphasized that your aim must be active and not passive. A definite aim will never be anything else but a mere wish unless you become a person of initiative and aggressively and persistently pursue that aim until it has been fulfilled. You can get nowhere without persistence, a fact which cannot be too often repeated. The difference between persistence and lack of it is the same as the difference between wishing for a thing and positively determining to get it. To become a person of initiative, you must form the habit of aggressively and persistently following the object of your desire and definite chief aim, until you acquire it, whether this requires 1 year or 20 years. You might as well have no definite chief aim as to have such an aim without continuous effort to achieve it. You are not making the most of this course if you do not take some step each day that brings you near realization of your definite chief aim. Do not fool yourself or permit yourself to be misled to believe that the object of your definite chief aim will matter, alive if you only wait. The materialization will come through your own determination, backed by your own carefully laid plans, and your own initiative in putting these plans into action, or it will not come at all. One of the major requisites for leadership is the power of quick and firm decision. Analysis of more than 16,000 people disclosed the fact that leaders are always men of ready decision, even in matters of small importance, while the follower is never a person of quick decision. This is worth remembering. The follower, in whatever walk of life you find him, is a man who seldom knows what he wants. He vacillates, procrastinates, and actually refuses to reach a decision, even in matters of the smallest importance, unless a leader induces him to do so. To know that the majority of people cannot and will not reach decisions quickly, if at all, is of great help to the leader, who knows what he wants and has a plan for getting it. Here it will be observed how closely allied are the two laws covered by Lesson 2 and this lesson. The leader not only works with a definite chief aim, but he has a very definite plan for attaining the object of that aim. It will be seen then also that the law of self-confidence becomes an important part of the working equipment of the leader. The chief reason why the follower does not reach decisions is that he lacks the self-confidence to do so. Every leader makes use of the law of a definite purpose, the law of self-confidence, and the law of initiative and leadership. And if he is an outstanding, successful leader, he makes use also of the laws of imagination, enthusiasm, self-control, pleasing personality, accurate thinking, concentration, and tolerance. Without the combined use of all these laws, no one may become a really great leader. Omission of a single one of these laws lessens the power of the leader proportionately. A salesman for the LaSalle Extension University called on a real estate dealer in a small western town for the purpose of trying to sell the real estate man a course in salesmanship and business management. When the salesman arrived at the prospective student's office, he found the gentleman pecking out a letter by the two-finger method of an antiquated typewriter. The salesman introduced himself, then proceeded to state his business and describe the course he had come to sell. The real estate man listened with apparent interest. After the sales talk had been completed, the salesman hesitated, waiting for some signs of yes or no from his prospective client. Thinking that perhaps he had not made the sales talk quite strong enough, he briefly went over the merits of the course he was selling a second time. Still, there was no response from the prospective student. The salesman then asked the direct question, "You want this course, do you not?" In a slow, drawling tone of voice, the real estate man replied, "Well, I hardly know whether I do or not." No doubt he was telling the truth, because he's one of the millions of men who find it hard to reach decisions. Being an able judge of human nature, the salesman then arose, put on his hat, placed his literature back in his briefcase, and made ready to leave. Then he resorted to tactics which were somewhat drastic, and took the real estate man by surprise with his startling statement. "I am going to take it upon myself to say something to you that you will not like, but it may be of help to you. Take a look at this office in which you work. The floor is dirty. The walls are dusty. The typewriter you are using looks as it might be the one Mr. Noah used in the ark during the big flood. Your pants are bagged at the knees. Your collar is dirty. Your face is unshaven, and you have a look in your eyes that tells me you are defeated. Please go ahead and get mad. That's just what I want you to do, because it may shock you into doing some thinking that will be of help to you and to those who are dependent upon you. I can see in my imagination the home in which you live. Several little children, none too well dressed and perhaps none too well fed. A mother whose dress is 3 seasons out of style, whose eyes carry the same look of defeat that yours do. This little woman whom you married has stuck by you, but you have not made good in life as she had hoped, when you were first married, that you would. Please remember that I am not now talking to a prospective student, because I would not sell you this course at this particular moment if you offered to pay cash in advance. Because if I did, you would not have the initiative to complete it, and we want no failures on our student list. The talk I am now giving you will make it impossible, perhaps, for me ever to sell you anything, but it is going to do something for you that has never been done before, providing it makes you think. Now, I will tell you in a very few words exactly why you are defeated, why you are pecking out letters on an old typewriter in an old dirty office in a little town. It is because you do not have the power to reach a decision. All your life, you have been forming the habit of dodging the responsibility of reaching decisions until you have come now to where it is and it's well nigh impossible for you to do so. If you had told me that you wanted the course or that you did not want it, I could have sympathized with you because I would have known that lack of funds was what caused you to hesitate. But what did you say? Why, you admitted you did not know whether you wanted it or not. If you will think it over what I have said, I am sure you will acknowledge that it has become a habit with which you dodge the responsibility of reaching a clear-cut decision on practically all matters that affect you. The real estate man sat glued in his chair with his under jaw dropped. His eyes bulged in astonishment, but he made no attempt to answer the biting indictment. The salesman said goodbye and started for the door. After he had closed the door behind him, he again opened it, walked back in with a smile on his face, took his seat in front of the astonished real estate man, and explained his conduct in this way. I do not blame you at all if you feel hurt at my remarks. In fact, I sort of hope that you have been offended. But now let me say this, man to man, that I think you have intelligence, and I am sure that you have ability, but you have fallen into a habit that has whipped you. No man is ever down and out until he is under the sod. You may be temporarily down, but you can get up again. And I am just sportsman enough to give you my hand and offer you a lift, if you will accept my apologies for what I have said. You do not belong in this town. You would starve to death in the real estate business in this place, even if you were a leader in your field. Get yourself a new suit of clothes, even if you have to borrow the money from which to do it. Then go over to St. Louis with me, and I will introduce you to real estate men who will give you a chance to earn some money, and at the same time teach you some of the important things about this line of work that you can capitalize later on. If you haven't enough credit to get the clothes you need, I will stand good for you at a store in St. Louis where I have a charge account. I am in earnest, and my offer to help you is based upon the highest motive that can actuate a human being. I am successful in my own field, but I have not always been so. I went through just what you are now going through, but the important thing is that I went through it and got it over with, just as you are going to do if you will follow my advice. Will you come with me? The real estate man started to arise, but his legs wobbled and he sank back into his chair. Despite the fact that he was a great big fellow with rather pronounced manly qualities, known as the He-Man type, his emotions got the better of him and he actually wept. He made a second attempt and got on his feet, shook hands with the salesman, thanked him for his kindness, and said he was going to follow the advice, but he would do so in his own way. Calling for an application blank, he signed for the course on salesmanship and business management, made the first payment in nickels and dimes, and told the salesman he would hear from him again. 3 years later, this real estate man had an organization of 60 salesmen and one of the most successful real estate businesses in the city of St. Louis. The author of this course, who was advertising manager of the LaSalle Extension University at the time this incident happened, has been in this real estate man's office many times and has observed him over a period of more than 15 years. He is an entirely different man from the person interviewed by the LaSalle salesman over 15 years ago. And the thing that made him different is the same that makes you different. It is the power of decision, which is so essential to leadership. This real estate man is now a leader in the real estate field. He is directing the efforts of other salesmen and helping them to become more efficient. This one change in his philosophy has turned temporary defeat into success. Every new salesman who goes to work for this man is called into his private office before he is employed and told the story of his own transformation, word for word, just as it occurred when the LaSalle salesman first met him in his shabby little real estate office. Some 18 years ago, the author of this course made his first trip to the little town of Lumberport, West Virginia. At that time, the only means of transportation leading from Clarksburg, the largest nearby center, to Lumberport, was the Biltmore and Ohio Railroad and an interurban electric line which ran within 3 miles of the town. One could walk the 3 miles if he chose. Upon arrival at Clarksburg, I found that the only train going to Lumberport in for the noon had already gone, and not wishing to wait for the later afternoon train, I made the trip by trolley, with the intention of walking the 3 miles. On the way down, the rain began to pour, and those 3 miles had to be navigated on foot through deep yellow mud. When I arrived at Lumberport, my shoes and pants were muddy, and my disposition was none the better for the experience. The first person I met was V.L. Horner, who was then cashier of the Lumberport Bank. In a rather loud tone of voice, I asked of him, Why do you not get that trolley line extended from the junction over to Lumberport so your friends can get in and out of town without drowning in mud? Did you see a river with high banks at the edge of the town as you came in, he asked. I replied that I had seen it. Well, he continued, that's the reason we have no streetcars running into town. The cost of a bridge would be about $100,000, and that is more than the company owning the trolley line is willing to invest. We have been trying for 10 years to get them to build a line into town. Trying, I exploded. How hard have you tried? We have offered them every inducement we could afford, such as a free right-of-way from the junction into town and free use of the streets, but that bridge is a stumbling block. They simply will not stand the expense, claim they cannot afford such an expense for the small amount of revenue they would receive from the 3-mile extension. Then the law of success philosophy began to come to my rescue. I asked Mr. Horner if he would take a walk over to the river with me, that we might look at the spot that was causing so much inconvenience. He said he would be glad to do so. When we got to the river, I began to take inventory of everything in sight. I observed that the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad tracks ran up and down the riverbanks on both sides of the river, that the county road crossed the river on a rickety wooden bridge, both approaches to which were on several strands of railroad track, as the railroad company had its switching yards at that point. While we were standing there, a freight train blocked the crossing, and several teams stopped on both sides of the train, waiting for an opportunity to get through. The train kept the road blocked for about 25 minutes. With this combination of circumstances in mind, it required but little imagination to see that 3 different parties were or could be interested in the building of the bridge such as would be needed to carry the weight of a streetcar. It was obvious that the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company would be interested in such a bridge, because that would remove the county road from their switching tracks and save them a possible accident on the crossing, to say nothing of much loss of time and expense in cutting trains to allow teams to pass. It was also obvious that the county commissioner would be interested in the bridge, because it would raise the county road to a better level and make it more serviceable to the public. And of course the street railway company was interested in the bridge, but it did not wish to pay the entire cost. All these facts passed through my mind as I stood there and watched the freight train being cut for the traffic to pass through. A definite chief aim took place in my mind, also a definite plan for its attainment. The next day I got together a committee of townspeople, consisting of the mayor, councilmen, and some leading citizens, and called on the division superintendent of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company at Grafton. We convinced him that it was worth 1/3 of the cost of the bridge to get the county road off his company's tracks. Next we went to the county commissioners and found them to be quite enthusiastic over the possibility of getting a new bridge by paying for only 1/3 of it. They promised to pay their 1/3 providing we could arrange for the other 2/3. We then went to the president of the traction company that owned the trolley line at Fairmont, and laid before him an offer to donate all the rights of way and pay for 2/3 of the cost of the bridge, providing he would begin building the line into town promptly. We found him receptive also. 3 weeks later, a contract had been signed between the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Company, the Monongahela Valley Traction Company, and the county commissioners of Harrison County, providing for the construction of the bridge, 1/3 of its cost to be paid by each. 2 months later, the right-of-way was being graded and the bridge was underway, and 3 months after that, streetcars were running into Lumberport on regular schedule. This incident meant much to the town of Lumberport because it provided transportation that enabled people to get in and out of town without undue effort. It also meant a great deal to me because it served to introduce me as one who got things done. 2 very definite advantages resulted from this transaction. The chief counsel for the traction company gave me a position as assistant, and later it was the means of an introduction which led to my appointment as the advertising manager of the LaSalle Extension University. Lumberport, West Virginia was then, and still is, a small town, and Chicago was a very large city and located a considerable distance away. But news of initiative and leadership has a way of taking on wings and traveling. 4 of the 15 laws of success were combined in the transaction described, namely, a definite chief aim, self-confidence, imagination and initiative and leadership. The law of doing more than paid for also entered somewhat into the transaction, because I was not offered anything and in fact did not expect pay for what I did. To be perfectly frank, I appointed myself to the job of getting the bridge built more as a sort of challenge to those who said it could not be done than I did with the expectation of getting paid for it. By my attitude, I rather intimidated to Mr. Orner that I could get the job done, and he was not slow to snap me up and put me to the test. It may be helpful to call attention here to the part which imagination played in the transaction. For 10 years, the townspeople of Lumberport had been trying to get a streetcar line built into town. It must not be concluded that the town was without men of ability, because that would be inaccurate. In fact, there were many men of ability in the town, but they had been making the mistake which is so commonly made by us all, of trying to solve their problem through one single source, whereas there were actually 3 sources of solution available to them. $100,000 was too much for one company to assume for the construction of a bridge, but when the cost was distributed between 3 interested parties, the amount to be borne by each was more reasonable. The question might be asked, why did not some of the local townsmen think of this 3-way solution? In the first place, they were so close to their problem that they failed to take a perspective, bird's-eye view of it, which would have suggested one solution. This also is a common mistake, and one that is always avoided by great leaders. In the second place, these town people had never before coordinated their efforts or worked as an organized group with the sole purpose in mind of finding a way to get a streetcar line built into town. This also is another common error made by men in all walks of life, that of failure to work in unison, in a thorough spirit of cooperation. I, being an outsider, had less difficulty in getting cooperative action than one of their group might have had. Too often there is a spirit of selfishness in small communities which prompts each individual to think that his ideas should prevail. It is an important part of the leader's responsibility to induce people to subordinate their own ideas and interests for the good of the whole, and this applies to matters of a civic business, social, political, financial, or industrial nature. Success, no matter what may be one's conception of that term, is nearly always a question of one's ability to get others to subordinate their own individualities and follow a leader. The leader who has the personality and the imagination to induce his followers to accept his plan and carry them out faithfully is always an able leader. The next lesson on imagination will take you still further into the art of tactful leadership. In fact, leadership and imagination are so closely allied and so essential for success that one cannot be successfully applied without the other. Initiative is the moving force that pushes the leader ahead, but imagination is the guiding spirit that tells him which way to go. Imagination enabled the author of this course to analyze the Lumberport Bridge problem, break it up into its 3 component parts, and assemble these parts in a practical working plan. Nearly every problem may be so broken up into parts which are more easily manageable as parts than they are from assembled as a whole. Perhaps one of the most important advantages of imagination is that it enables one to separate all problems into their component parts and to reassemble them in more favorable combinations. It has been said that all battles in warfare are won or lost, not on the firing line after the battle begins, but back of the lines through the sound strategy or the lack of it, used by the generals who plan the battles. What is true of warfare is equally true in business and in most other problems which confront us throughout life. We win or lose according to the nature of the plans we build and carry out, a fact which serves to emphasize the value of the laws of initiative and leadership, imagination, self-confidence, and a definite chief aim. With the intelligent use of these 4 laws, one may build plans for any purpose whatsoever, which cannot be defeated by any person or group of persons who do not employ or understand these laws. There is no escape from the truth here stated. Organized effort is effort which is directed according to a plan, that which was conceived with an aid of imagination, guided by a definite chief aim, and given momentum with initiative and self-confidence. These 4 laws blend into one and become a power in the hands of a leader. Without their aid, effective leadership is impossible. You are now ready for the lesson on imagination. Read that lesson with the thought in mind of all that has been here stated, and it will take on a deeper meaning. Intolerance, an after the lesson visit with the author. If you must give expression to prejudice and hatred and intolerance, do not speak it, but write it. Write it in the sands near the water's edge. When the dawn of intelligence shall spread over the eastern horizon of human progress, and ignorance and superstition shall have left their last footprints on the sands of time, it will be recorded in the last chapter of the book of man's crimes that his most grievous sin was that of intolerance. The bitterest intolerance grows out of religious, racial, and economic prejudices and differences of opinion. How long, O God, until we poor mortals will understand the folly of trying to destroy one another because we are of different religious beliefs and racial tendencies? Our allotted time on this earth is but a fleeting moment. Like a candle, we are lighted, shine for a moment, and flicker out. Why can we not learn to so live during this brief earthly visit, that when the great caravan called death draws up and announces its visit completed, we shall be ready to fold our tents and silently follow out into the great unknown without fear and trembling? I am hoping that I will find no Jews or Gentiles, Catholics or Protestants, Germans, Englishmen, or Frenchmen when I shall have crossed the bar to the other side. I am hoping that I will find there only human souls, brothers and sisters all, unmarked by race, creed, or color, for I shall want to be done with intolerance, so I may rest in peace throughout eternity. You will see at the top of the previous page a picture which describes the futility of combat. The 2 male deer have engaged in the fight to the finish, each believing that he will be the winner. Off at the side, the female awaits the victor, little dreaming that tomorrow the bones of both combatants will be bleaching in the sun. Poor, foolish animals, someone will say. Perhaps, but not very different from the man family. Man engages his brothers in mortal combat because of competition. The 3 major forms of competition are sex, economic, and religious in nature. 20 years ago, a great educational institution was doing a thriving business and rendering a worthy service to thousands of students. The 2 owners of the school married 2 beautiful and talented young women who were especially accomplished in the art of piano playing. The 2 wives became involved in an argument as to which one was the more accomplished in this art. The disagreement was taken up by each of the husbands. They became bitter enemies. Now the bones of that once prosperous school lie bleaching in the sun. The 2 bucks shown in the picture above locked horns over the attentions of the doe. The 2 man-bucks locked horns over the self-same impulse. In one of the great industrial plants, 2 young foremen locked horns because one received a promotion which the other believed he should have had. For more than 5 years, the silent undertow of hatred and intolerance showed itself. The men under each of the foremen became inoculated with the spirit of dislike which they saw cropping out in their superiors. Slowly, the spirit of retaliation began to spread over the entire plant. The men became divided into little cliques. Production began to fall off. then some financial difficulty, and finally bankruptcy for the company. Now the bones of the once prosperous business lie bleaching in the sun, and the two foremen and several thousand others were compelled to start off all over again in another field. Down in the mountains of West Virginia lived two peaceful families of mountain folk, the Hatfields and the McCoys. They had been friendly neighbors for 3 generations. A razorback pig belonging to the McCoy family crawled through the fence into the Hatfields' family cornfield. The Hatfields turned their hound loose on the pig. The McCoys retaliated by killing the dog. Then began a feud that has lasted for 3 generations and cost many lives of the Hatfields and the McCoys. In a fashionable suburb of Philadelphia, certain gentlemen of wealth have built their homes. In front of each house the word intolerance is written. One man builds a high steel fence in front of his house. The neighbor next to him, not to be outdone, builds a fence twice as high. Another buys a new motor car, and the man next door goes him one better by purchasing 2 new cars. One remodels his house, adding a colonial-style porch. The man next door adds a new porch and a Spanish-style garage for good measure. The big mansion on top of the hill gives a reception which brings a long line of motor cars, filled with people who have nothing in particular in common with the host. Then follows a series of receptions all down the Gold Coast line, each trying to outshine all the others. The mister, but they don't call him that in fashionable neighborhoods, goes to business in the back seat of a Rolls-Royce that is managed by a chauffeur and a footman. Why does he go to business? To make money, of course. Why does he want more money when he already has millions of dollars? So he can keep outdoing his wealthy neighbors. Poverty has some advantages. It never drives those who are poverty-stricken to lock horns in the attempt to out-poverty their neighbors. Wherever you see men with their horns locked in conflict, you may trace the cause of the combat to one of these 3 cases of intolerance: religious difference of opinion, economic competition, or sex competition. The next time you observe 2 men engaged in any sort of hostility toward each other, just close your eyes and think for a moment, and you may see them in their transformed nature, very much resembling the male deer shown in the picture above. Off at one side you may see the object of the combat, a pile of gold, a religious emblem, or a female or females. Remember, the purpose of this essay is to tell some of the truth about human nature, with the object of causing its readers to think. Its writer seeks no glory or praise, and likely he will receive neither in connection with his particular subject. Andrew Carnegie and Henry Frick did more than any other 2 men to establish the steel industry. Both made millions of dollars for themselves. Came the day when economic intolerance sprang up between them. To show his contempt for Frick, Carnegie built a tall skyscraper and named it the Carnegie Building. Frick retaliated by erecting a much taller building alongside of the Carnegie Building, naming it the Frick Building. These 2 gentlemen locked horns in a fight to the finish. Carnegie lost his mind and perhaps more, for all we have this world knows. What Frick lost is known only to himself and the keeper of the great records. In memory, their bones lie bleaching in the sun of prosperity. The steel men of today are managing things differently. Instead of locking horns, they now interlock directorates, with the result that each is practically a solidified, strong unit of the whole industry. The steel men of today understand the difference between the meaning of the words competition and cooperation, a difference which the remainder of us would do well to understand also. In England, the men who own the mines and those who run the labor unions locked horns. Had not the cooler heads unlocked these horns, the bones of the British Empire, including both the owners of industry and the labor unions, should soon have lain bleaching in the sun. 1 year of open combat between the unions and the owners of industry in Great Britain would have meant annihilation of the British Empire. The other nations of the world would have grabbed all the economic machinery now controlled by Britain. Let the leaders of American industry and unionism not forget. 15 factors enter into the attainment of success. One of these is tolerance. The other 14 are mentioned many times in this series of lessons. Intolerance binds man's legs with the shackles of ignorance, and covers his eyes with the scales of fear and superstition. Intolerance closes the book of knowledge and writes on the cover, "Open not this book again. The last word has been herein written." It is not your duty to be tolerant, it is your privilege. Remember as you read this article that sowing the seed of intolerance is the sole and exclusive business of some men. All wars and all strikes and all other forms of human suffering bring profit to some. If this were not true, there would be no wars or strikes or other similar forms of hostilities. In the United States today, there is a well-organized system of propaganda, the object of which is to stir up strife and hostility between the owners of industry and those who work in these industries. Take another look at the picture at the beginning of this article, and you may see what will happen to all who lock horns in labor disagreements. And remember that it is always the bones of the workers, and not those of the leaders of either the unions or the industries, that lie bleaching in the sun after the fight is over. When you feel yourself preparing to lock horns with someone, remember that it will be more profitable if you lock hands instead. A warm, hearty handshake leaves no bones bleaching in the sun. Love is the only bow on life's dark cloud. It is the morning and the evening star. It shines upon the cradle of the babe and sheds its radiance upon the quiet tomb. It is the mother of art, inspirer of poem, patriot and philosopher. It is the air and light of every heart, builder of every home, kindler of every fire on every hearth. It was the first to dream of immortality. It fills the world with melody, for music is the voice of love. Love is the magician, the enchanter, that changes worthless things to joy, and makes right royal kings and queens of common clay. It is the perfume of the wondrous flower, the heart, and without that sacred passion, the divine swoon. We are less than beasts, but with it, earth is heaven, and we are gods. Ingersoll. Cultivate love for your fellow man, and you will no longer want to lock horns with him in futile combat. Love makes every man his brother's keeper. Verse. Love indeed is light from heaven, a spark of that immortal fire, which angels shared by Allah given, to lift from earth our low desire. Devotion wafts the mind above, but heaven itself descends in love. A feeling from the Godhead caught, to wean from self each sordid thought. A ray of Him who formed the whole, a glory circling round the soul. Byron. End of Lesson 5.